With summer in full swing, I feel that familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I'm not trying to waste money on pieces that I'm going to wear once or for just one season. And that's where Quince comes in. Their clothes are timeless, feel luxurious, look elevated, and the quality is way beyond what you'd expect for the price. I just got a white linen maxi dress. Now, if I had paid for that dress in a department store, I would have paid $170. Well, guess what? I got it for $69. And by the way, that same dress comes in blue pinstripe. Think 100% European linen top starting at $30. Washable silk dresses and skirts and soft cotton sweaters. Versatile warm weather pieces that you're going to reach for again and again. And the best part, everything with Quince is half the cost of similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. So you've got to give your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/Kate Casey for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/Kate Casey to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/Kate Casey.
Why are there ridges on Reese's peanut butter cups? Probably so they never slip from her hands. Could you imagine? I'd lose it. Luckily, Reese's thought about that. Wonder what else they think about. Probably chocolate and peanut butter.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey, and welcome back for this Saturday series episode. My guest today is Kate Kaput. 2 years ago, an AncestryDNA result completely upended her life. At 38 years old, she discovered that she was donor conceived. And not only that, she had 2 half-sisters, and one lived just blocks away. One of them had even been following her on Instagram. So what started out as a total shock turned into this beautiful, wild, and emotional journey into her origins, her identity, and what family really means. So in this episode, we discuss the ripple effects of DNA testing, how it can unlock long-held secrets, and what that means when those secrets rewrite your story. Kate walks me through the moment that she found out, how she connected with her sisters, and also what happened when she looked for her biological donor. It's a conversation about grief, curiosity, healing, and also redefining what it means to belong, but most importantly, your own identity. We also talk about fertility donation, something that's becoming more common, but still has so many layers, especially when it comes to transparency, ethics, and emotional impact. If you've ever taken a DNA test or even thought about it, this story is going to stay with you for quite some time. Plus, if you've listened to my conversation with my friend Karen, who also found out that she was donor conceived, that's in episode 880. You know that these stories stay with you. That is an also must listen. That, again, is episode 880. And also an update from Sarah Fraser, host of The Sarah Fraser Show. You will remember that she opened up about her egg donation journey in episode 1329. So it was just like last week. Well, we've got an update. She's pregnant. So both Sarah and Karen's stories are an absolute must listen to. So again, Karen's episode is episode 880, and she talks about finding out that she was donor conceived. And then Sarah's episode is episode 1329, and she talks about getting an egg donation. And then in this episode, you get to hear Kate's story. What I love about all of this is that it's from different perspectives. And I think that the more we talk about our own personal stories, I feel like it really does heal us. I know that Karen has said coming forward with her story has helped enormously. Again, the more we learn about each other, the more we realize we're alike. So here is my episode with Kate. I met another Kate. Kate, meet Kate.
Hi. So I love another Kate.
Well, tell everybody first, like where you're from originally, and tell me about your family of origin.
So I grew up in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. I live in Cleveland now, but I grew up with, as an only child, just with my mom. My dad passed away when I was 10 from lung cancer. And so it was just me and my mom for most of my life. And we're super close. I moved back to the Cleveland area about 10 years ago now, mostly to live closer to my mom. So that's kind of me, the family background.
What is Cleveland like? Like, if you were to paint the picture of what it's like to grow up there, and also, like, what are the people like there?
Sure. So I love Cleveland. I am such a Cleveland evangelist and a Northeast Ohio evangelist in general. Everyone here is so friendly. It's just a very nice place to be and to be from. I lived on the East Coast for a while, for 7 years, and I really liked it. But when I got back to Ohio, I just felt, not just because it's home, but the people here are really nice. It's just a friendly place to be. Yeah. And I like about Cleveland. Cleveland is a decent sized city. We have really great food. We have pretty good stuff here, right? We've got all of the sports teams, even if they're not good. We've got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, like lots of fun things to do here. But then also the suburbs are very close by. The traffic's not bad. It's just, and we live also right on one of the Great Lakes. So Lake Erie is right there. And so we've got a beach right nearby. So I feel like it's all the good stuff, right in one.
Now, when you were growing up, was there an open discussion in your home about your birth story?
There was not. As far as I have always known, it was just kind of a regular family story, right? And me and my mom and my dad. I do remember when I was a kid asking my mom, like how little kids want a sibling. I remember wanting a sibling, and my mom was sort of like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, but that's why we have so many friends and family friends and such a big community, and you love your cousins, right? So that's a thing that sort of stands out to me as having, now when I look back at my story, I remember that piece, that little clue, but no conversations growing up about kind of how I got here or how I came to be. As far as I knew, it was just kind of the traditional way and the regular story.
Now, were you the kind of kid that looked at your parents and sort of surveyed them time to time? Like, I got that from them in terms of physicality. I feel like I got that in terms of personality.
That's a great question. I love that question because I think especially because my dad passed away when I was a kid, there was a lot I didn't know about him or remember about him. And I was always kind of seeking that, trying to figure out ways that I might be like my dad. Asking his friends what he had been like, asking our family what he was like, and kind of trying to remember who he might have been and how I might be like him, both physically and personality-wise. My mom and I have a lot in common, but also kind of don't. My mom is an introvert. I'm an extrovert. My mom is, kind of a quiet, she's a librarian. She's kind of what you imagine when you think of a librarian. And I have sort of always been a bigger personality, bigger sense of humor. And I think some of that came from my dad. I also don't particularly look like either of them. So I was always kind of trying to figure out, where some of my features came from. And I think ended up just deciding some people just don't look like their parents. Okay.
Did you have any friends at school who had dissimilar birth stories? Anything that was out of the norm that you found yourself kind of paying extra attention to? Like you were drawn to their story?
An interesting question too, because I remember, we have family friends who had adopted their kids. I had a couple of friends who I knew who were adopted. I didn't know of anyone. I didn't even know growing up what it meant to be donor conceived. I don't know that I had ever heard of that. So, we had friends who had single family or single parent families, or they had blended families with step siblings, step parents, but nothing I think that would have given me any clues. I do remember, this is sort of an interesting anecdote that I don't know that I've shared in telling this more recent kind of revelation about my DNA stuff. I remember as a kid, I had a friend whose mom told her, oh, Kate doesn't look like her family. She must be adopted. And my friend had said to me, oh, my mom thinks you're adopted. And I said that to my mom. I was like, am I adopted? And my mom was very upset about it. It's like kind of a weird thing for an adult to say about another kid, right? Like you don't.
Absolutely.
You don't know if I am or not. Don't tell your kid that I might be. But I remember having sort of like a panic where I was like, am I adopted? And you just didn't tell me. And my mom was like, no. And I was probably, I don't even know how old I was. That was maybe third or fourth grade. But it is weird that kind of stands out in my memory because I remember my mom being really upset about that. But yeah, nothing else that I can think of.
So as you begin to get older and you start to date, and the idea becomes a little bit more realistic of at some point you're going to get married, you're starting relationships. And the idea of family and starting one is sort of hovers. I think in most families, parents, namely mothers, start to have conversations with their daughters about their own fertility journey. did that happen for you?
I think that, for a long time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to have kids. And so my mom and I weren't having those conversations very early that I can think of. My mom was always really good about not pushing me on whether I wanted to have kids. And so I sort of never sought out those conversations, which means we didn't really have them. I remember my mom saying that it took them a long time to get pregnant with me. But I don't know that that registered with me as like a potential issue for me or anything like that, because I just wasn't sure that I wanted to have kids. It did turn out, I learned that I have a medical condition called primary ovarian insufficiency that my mom probably had too. It does run in families. My mom didn't know about it. But so essentially it means that I'm in early menopause. And so by the time my husband and I had decided that we wanted to have kids, it turns out that I couldn't have kids. And so we just sort of immediately were like, okay, we're super interested in adoption. We had talked about that in the past. My husband grew up with, his biological mom, but I guess who is technically a stepfather, but there's no other father in the picture. His stepdad adopted him when he was 7. And so, he identifies as being adopted. And so we were like, all right, we'll just pivot to adoption. Great. We love that. And so my mom and I never really had those conversations about fertility or about her experience, like trying to have me.
Mm-hmm. So at some point, you're going to take a 23andMe test. How does that process go?
Yeah. So I did an AncestryDNA.com test. I want to say like 7 or 8 years ago now. And I really just wanted to know kind of my dad's ethnicity specifically. My mom is 100% Ashkenazi Jewish, and we kind of have always known that. So not a lot of questions from her end. But my dad didn't have a great family life growing up. And when he passed away, he has a sister who is still alive, but who I haven't seen since I was a kid. So I don't even really have that experience of like knowing my dad's family or relatives on my dad's side to have sort of taught me about that piece of things. So I just really wanted to know, like, well, what's the other 50% of my DNA? And so, about 7 or 8 years ago, I took a test and it was really interesting. It came back exactly what I expected, 50% Ashkenazi Jewish, and then the other half unexpected, but cool, right? It's like 40% Irish and 10% Scottish. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, my dad was Irish, Scottish, cool. And that was sort of it for a few years. I just assumed that was my dad's, that was my dad's DNA, like
his genetic makeup. Yeah.
Correct. My dad, who I knew and loved and grew up with for a little while. Right.
Now, I remember when I got my test, calling my mom and of course saying it's exactly what I expected it to be. Did you even have a call with her to tell her? And do you think she was panicked?
So I know now that I think she was panicked. I know now that she was panicked because we have had that conversation since. At the time, my mom did not really allude to anything. And I don't know that I called her to say like, oh, listen to this. But I did at one point say, oh, I did an AncestryDNA test and it told me that, dad was Irish, Scottish. And isn't that cool? Like St. Patrick's Day is coming up in a month. Like I get to celebrate as a person who's half Irish. Cool. And she was like, oh yeah, cool. And I now know that she was sort of internally panicking. I know that there are people who will say that was a great opportunity for your mom to have told you. And that's probably true. But, my mom had kind of lived with this secret my whole life. My parents had always apparently planned to tell me that I am donor conceived. But then when my dad passed away, my mom didn't know how to tell me, I was 10 years old. My mom didn't know how to tell me on her own. She still felt like I was too young to know. And then she didn't want it. She was afraid it was going to taint my memory of my dad or my memory of my relationship with my dad. And so she was kind of putting it off until it felt like the right time. And then I think she felt like it had been too long, too much time had passed. And she was like, well, I can't tell her now. My mom and I are really, really close. Like she's my best friend. She comes up every weekend. I see her all the time. Like I said, I moved home to live closer to her. But I know that she was secretly panicking about me finding this out and whether she should tell me first. And if so, how and when and what it would do to our relationship.
Summer is my favorite time of the year. Nothing is better than a backyard party. Do you love having people over to enjoy the warm weather in your outdoor space? Do you need ways to entertain the kids while they're out of school? Well, if you're having a backyard get-together, Wayfair is your one-stop shop for outdoor entertaining. Cookout, shop patio tables, grills, and dishware. Pool party, kick back with lounge chairs, day beds, and umbrellas. Game night, Wayfair's got cornhole, croquet, and string lights to set the scene. And with fast and easy shipping, it's never been easier to get ready to party. So however you kick back, you can go to Wayfair for effortless, entertaining, and game-filled gatherings. I live in a neighborhood with houses that look like Cape Cod, which is where I spent time as a child. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And with Wayfair, I can decorate my entire house and my backyard with the most beautiful white furniture that takes me back to Chatham. There's something for every style and every home, no matter your space or budget. And the best part, free and easy delivery, even on the big stuff. I can't even tell you, I feel like I ordered it and came right away. Shop outdoor furniture, grills, lawn games, and way more for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to explore a huge outdoor selection. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home.
There's some incredible TV coming out of the UK right now. Brits just do it differently. The accents, the wit, the scenery, the devastating one-liners disguised as compliments. It's all streaming on BritBox. They have the best mysteries, dramas, comedies, and seriously addicting originals like Outrageous, based on the true story of the Mitford sisters. They were kind of like the Kardashians of the 1930s, wealthy, audacious, chaotic, wildly opinionated, and always making headlines. And chances are you've never heard their story. It's stunning. It's jaw-dropping. It's very British. So check out Outrageous. It could be your next favorite. Don't miss Outrageous, streaming now only on BritBox.
So what is the next step in this journey?
Yeah. So like I said, for about 5 years, there was no step in the journey, right? There was nothing. It was just like, I don't know, sometimes I would pop in on AncestryDNA.com to see if it had like new parts of Ireland that my background was from or whatever, the way it does. And I got an email about 2 years ago. I got an email that said, you have new matches, right? As though it's Tinder. And I was like, what do you mean I have new matches, right? So, it tells you some of your actual relatives if they've also taken those tests. And until then, my top match had been my uncle, who's my mom's brother. And I was like, oh, yep, there's Uncle Jim. But I was like, what do you mean I have new matches? So I log in and there are 2 people listed above my uncle. And it says that they are my half sister. I think it said it tells you what their relationship to you might be. And it was like, they're either a grandparent or a half sibling. Mm-hmm. And I did a little bit of Googling and I was like, okay, they're not old enough to be my grandparents. So what do you mean these are my half siblings? So that was really the start of the unraveling or the unveiling of this story.
When you first see that, what, if you can take me back to that moment, what's kind of sets in, obviously first shock, but we're talking like an hour or 2 later when you're just really sitting into that. What were the first feelings that kind of popped up?
I think I was just I think I was kind of excited, right? Because I'm an only child and I was like, siblings? What? Like, who could that be? Also a little panicked because I was like, oh no, have I unveiled some family secret, right? Did someone cheat on someone somewhere? Was someone...
Or maybe your father had a baby, he had no idea.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, is there something that and so then I'm sort of gaming it out, right? Like I said, I had looked them up and these 2 half sisters, I looked up, I could see that they were just 2 years older than me. And so I was like, oh, if my father had a baby, it's because he cheated on my mom. I'm sort of gaming out all the possibilities. And I did consider, I don't know, weirdly, if I ever considered that maybe I was donor conceived. Like, I think I considered that maybe that maybe my dad was the donor or something. I can't really remember, but I was just like, I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller. I think I went into that like possible story mode where I was like, what are the possible threads here? Like, what could this be? Incidentally, like I said, I think I missed what the actual, that's the one that never crossed my mind. But I sat with it for a little bit and then not for very long because I think I was like, I want to dig in. I'm going to try to figure this out. And so one of the weirdest things about this is that one of the sisters, I looked her up and I could see that she lives 3 blocks away from me.
You can see the name. Can you see a photo?
I can't see a photo, but they had made accounts with their full names.
Wow.
And so I was able to just fully Google them, like a creep, like the consummate millennial that I am. I was like, I can find information about you, whatever. So I realized that one of them lives 3 streets away from me. And I was like, what are the odds? And then I find her on Instagram and she already follows me. She was already following me on Instagram. And I was like, does this person know what's going on? Like, what is this about? So I decide I'm just going to reach out to her. And so I send her a message. And this was probably, no joke, within 12 hours of getting the results. I was like, I'm just going to ask. And so I sent her a message and I was like, hi, so do you think we should talk about these DNA results that presumably you have also seen that say that we're half sisters? And she was like, oh my God, yes. Like, I've just been sitting on it. I don't know what to do either. She was like, do you know what this is about? And I was like, nope. Any idea? She was like, no, I just have a sister and a mom and a dad. Like, I don't know. And I was like, me neither. And we decided that we would both go talk to our families and then sort of reconvene. And my mom happened to be coming up to my house that afternoon. And so I hadn't planned to ask her right then, but I just sort of like blurted it out. I remember really clearly we were standing in my kitchen and I said, so Mom, I got new results on AncestryDNA.com. She said, oh, really? And I said, yeah, it says that I have 2 half sisters. And she was like, oh, how could that be? And I was like, all right, Mom, I think the jig's up, right? Like she's got to know, right? Or like have some. So I was like, Mom, do you know how this could be the case? Like, I just looked her right in the eye and I was like, Mom, do you know what this is? And I'll never forget my mom, like, just like crumpled. Like, she started crying so hard. And that's actually really hard for me to remember because it was really hard to watch. I was like, oh no, like this is clearly like some sort of pain point for my mom that I
tapped into.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered. I was more just like, what secret have you been keeping? And I hadn't really thought about, the humanity of it all and my mom as a person with a secret. And she started crying and she sat me, she said, can we go talk? And we went out on the back porch and, I sent a little message to my boss, like, I'm calling off work for the rest of the day. I'm having a family emergency. And my mom and I just sat on the back porch and talked. And she said, she said, hold on. Sorry. Can you hear my cat? My cat is freaking out in the background. Okay, great. All right. So she said, your dad had she said, your dad had an army injury and he found out that he couldn't have kids. And so we used a sperm donor to have you. And again, my mom is like weeping as she tells me this. And by that point, I'm like spinning out with the worst possible scenario as what she is about to tell me, cheating or assault or something horrible. And I was like, so she told me that. And I was like, oh, like, is that it? That's all? Okay. And I didn't say that to her, but I was like, wait, Mom, like, before we keep talking about it, I need you to take a breath. Like, this is okay. Like, okay. And I think when I tell people this story, they're like, are you sure you're not more traumatized by this? Like, aren't you more upset about this? That your mom basically told you that your dad was not your biological father. And I don't know. I mean, I've since thought about it a lot about why it hasn't felt particularly traumatic for me, because I know that sort of reveal does for other people. But in that moment, I was just sort of like, okay, that's like kind of the best case scenario of like what all the possibilities could be. Like, no one was hurt. You guys, my parents like really wanted to have me, so they made sure they could. That's lovely.
No other families were hurt in the process.
Yeah. I mean, the only hurtful thing is like having a secret kept from me for a long time, but I understand why she did it. And so, yeah, no other families were hurt in the process. I like that description of it. And so it actually felt like the best case scenario to me, where I was like, okay, well, let's talk this through and like, tell me about it. So we did.
It was so kind of you to give her grace in that moment, because I think for all women that have a fertility struggle, it can feel very isolating for them. And to have kept that secret, especially knowing how close you are, I'm sure she really appreciated you being so kind to her. To carry that kind of feeling for all those years and then compounded with the loss of her husband. I mean, that's a secret that I'm sure she didn't really even share with many people, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So my mom told me, like, as we're talking, right, again, she's crying. She said, I always meant to tell you. We always meant to tell you. I've been having nightmares about telling you on my deathbed. right? And like,
Wow.
I just like, that broke my heart. Like, and my mom's not that old. Like she's well, knock on wood. So I was like, how much longer? Like she would have been keeping the secret forever. She's kept the secret for, it was almost 40 years at the time. And I think her saying that, like, we're so close, it made it easy for me to like see my mom as a person first and not just as my mom, right? I'm imagining my mom 40 years ago, my mom and my dad 40 years ago being like, we really want to have a baby. What do we do? How do we do it? And I was sort of able to see my mom and my dad more as like me and my husband, being like, we really want to have a baby. What do we do? And I think it made it, I'm so sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, but it made it a lot easier for me to just like tap into like, okay, tell me what it was like for you. Before there was me, before it was me, the me that I am now, who feels like a secret has been kept from me. Tell me what it was like for you. And I think entering it into that with that like empathy for my mom, like how could I not have that empathy for her? Like, I don't know, how could I be mad at her?
Do you think that your work in storytelling allowed you to see things in a different perspective than someone perhaps who had been through a similar life experience?
I do really think so. I think that I'm a person who's always looking for, I guess when I say looking for stories, that sounds really dramatic, but I just mean sort of like looking at how our decisions affect one another down the road and how the things that we do for ourselves or with ourselves in mind, how they end up having bigger ripple effects on other people and in other people's lives. I'm always kind of like looking for those things. I'm very interested in that, sort of in the psychology of how people interact and in our stories and where they intersect. And so, I definitely had a moment where I was like, wow, I didn't know that my whole life had like this one big story behind it. Amazing. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit excited. I was like, this is a huge personal story, but it was also a really cool opportunity for me to kind of dig into who my parents were, and also, like I said, like, frankly, like how much they must have loved me, right? They wanted to have me so badly. That's so cool. Like how loved.
Tipping culture is out of control. Yesterday, I tipped someone just for handing me a napkin. So when Hotels.com gives me up to 20% off for being a member, I finally get tipped. And you know what? It feels good. Hotels.com. Members save up to 20% off at hundreds of thousands of hotels.
Hey grown-ups, I'm Mindy Thomas.
And I'm Guy Raz.
And we're the host of the #1 podcast for curious kids, Wow in the World.
Mindy, can you believe we have our very own Wow in the World STEM toys?
I totally can't believe it, Guy Raz. 8 years ago, when we started making Wow in the World, we were on a mission to spread the latest wow discoveries in science and technology and innovation. And now we get to help kids discover these wows right at home?
That's right. From the ultimate high-flying air rocket to the light-up terrarium, there's something for every wowzer in your world to play and tinker with.
Grown-ups, you can find Wow in the World STEM toys available now at select Walmart locations or online at walmart.com. Shop the wow now.
It didn't seem to change the fact that your father, who raised you, it didn't make him any less of a dad.
Right. So there's another piece to this that I really love, honestly. So I had said that my dad didn't have a great family of his own, a great biological family. But so, he very intentionally, when he was alive, he very intentionally sort of created family for himself. He built a community of friends who became family, right? I have all these fake uncles. I mean, they're real people, but they're not my real uncles. All these uncles who, even at my wedding, I couldn't have a father-daughter dance. I had all of my uncles, all these both biological and not biological uncles, come up and dance with me to Brown Eyed Girl, which was my song with my dad. Wow. And that was how we opened the dance floor, right? It was me and 6 of my uncles. And my dad has always, he very intentionally built this community. And I've always known that I'm not biologically related to my dad's college best friends, who I call uncle, but I call their kids my cousins. In some cases, 2 of his closest friends are brothers. And I call their kids my cousins. I called their parents grandma and grandpa. I went to visit that grandma in hospice on her deathbed. Like, that's my family. When I talk about my dad's side of the family, I've always been talking about those people. And I've always known that I wasn't biologically related to them. And so I think when I learned that I'm also not biologically related to my dad, he had kind of always left this legacy of like chosen family. And I suppose I didn't realize how intentionally, right? Like, he really understood. And so if anything, I think most people don't get to learn something new or feel connected to their parent 28 years after their parent has passed away. But for me, if any, like, it made me feel so much closer to my dad. I felt like I really understood him better and like what he kind of like did on purpose for me and like left behind for us.
In addition to this, now you have sisters. What has that process been like?
Yeah, so I have connected with one of my half sisters, the one who lives right down the street from me. And it has been truly wild. It has been so much fun to just, like I said, I'm an only child and I sort of identify as an only child. And now I have this half sister who is so similar to me in so many ways. We look quite a lot alike, which was interesting because, as I said, I don't really look like my mom or my dad, who I had spent my whole life thinking was my biological father. So to meet somebody who I quite look like, we have a lot of very similar mannerisms. We both had back braces for scoliosis growing up. And then we also have this like weird sort of parallel life track where it turns out her husband and my husband played soccer together as kids.
Wow.
Yeah, she and her husband had, when she and I first found each other, first met, they had just adopted a son who, incidentally, his name is the same name as my dad. Like, just like weird little things like this. So, they're also adoptive parents, just like we now are. We have all these cool things in common. And it's been really fun to get to know her. And she lives right down the street. So we try to get together a couple times a month, and it's been really fun.
Well, the big question is about her father, your biological father.
I do know that my two half sisters, their parents also used a donor. So we have this like other, sort of third party donor somewhere. Mm-hmm. So it's not her dad. It's not my dad. The fertility clinic that my parents used, incidentally, is the hospital where I now work full time. So that's weird, right? Just lots of little connections. I wasn't able to find anything through them. And so I did, again, what every good millennial does. And I turned to the internet and tried to figure it out. And I was able to figure out, based on some of the relatives, biological relatives that AncestryDNA had listed for me, I was able to figure out who he was based on some of them. And I did look him up on Facebook. The most that I really know is that he has the exact same face as me. So that's very weird. I look exactly like him. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, does he live in the vicinity?
No, he lives out of state. Okay. I think that he had been in Ohio for med school. Apparently, It's like very common. Clinics, ask med students to donate. And so I don't really know anything about him. I don't know if he remembers, if he wonders. From what I can tell on the internet, he seems like a very nice man, but I don't know him, so I don't want to speak to his experience or his life. I don't know if his family knows or any of that, but I'm certainly grateful to him. Like, I'm glad to be here. So I'm glad it all panned out. He also kind of looks like my dad, because I learned that, my parents had tried to choose a donor who kind of looked like my dad.
They did that a lot. Yep.
Yeah. And so this donor, I do look much more like him than I do like either of my parents, but he also kind of looks a lot like my dad. So kind of cool. I wouldn't be opposed to meeting or connecting, but I also don't feel like I need new family or need a family. I sort of feel like we can all only ever benefit from having more people in our lives who love us and care about us. And like, if it turns out that connection, that there would be something to connect over there, I'd be happy to. But also, yeah, my dad is my dad. I'm not like looking for a dad. But I'm glad that I was able to like identify who he was too, because I think it's just been cool to, even from afar, be like, oh yeah, cool.
Well, it's a real mitzvah.
Yeah. Yes. I'm really really grateful that whatever his motivations were for doing it, I'm really grateful that he did. And that my parents thought he was a match for them, because here I am and here my half sister is. And it's really been a cool revelation about my own background and my own story.
Now, with time, is your mom, do you feel, I mean, we obviously don't know without asking her, do you feel like she is unburdening herself of some of this secret that she's kept?
I definitely think so. My mom and I have talked about it where, when I first learned this story, like I said, I was weirdly kind of excited about it. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to feel out the whole story of it all. But I said to my mom, if you're not comfortable with that, I won't. This is your story too. I'm not going to tell your story. And my mom said, I've been keeping this secret for a really long time. It's your story now. And she really just gave me that permission to claim it as mine. We did together tell the brothers, who I said are two of my dad's closest friends. They were over at our house, with my cousins. We told them together. And it's been neat, I think, to see my mom, unburden herself, I think, and just not have to keep that secret. And my mom and my, the one half sister, they have met. My mom loves updates on her. Anytime we hang out, my mom's like, can you send me a picture? Send me a picture. And, I think it's been, I can only imagine, she's told me, but I can still only imagine what a relief it has been for her to not have to keep that secret anymore. And also to see such a kind of joyful resolution for me, at least. It hasn't negatively affected my relationship with her. I think if anything, it's made it a lot stronger. And I know that that's what she had been most worried about, right? We've been so close all along, and she was worried that we wouldn't be after this, and we're closer than ever. And so I think that has been a huge relief for her.
The last question is, when you look back at this experience, and if you were to tell people, what you've learned from it, the question is, what have you learned to be true about identity?
Oh, that's a big question. Let me think for a sec. I think that a lot of people box themselves into identity. I understand that, identity helps us feel more secure in who we are. It helps us connect with others. It helps us tell our own story. But I think that there's a little bit of a risk in being too attached to the pieces of your identity that you think you know to be true. And I think I learned very quickly that, I said I've always identified as an only child. I have sort of a big personality, and I'm really close with my mom, like an only child, but I very quickly was like, oh, I'm an only child, and now I'm somebody's sister. Now I'm somebody's donor conceived child out in the world, whether he knows it or not. There are these other pieces that kind of change. I identified as my father's daughter, and I still do, but now there's this other piece of it. I think if you cling too tightly to the pieces of your identity that you think you know, it can be really painful and destabilizing when you learn differently or when something changes. But if you're sort of willing to see your identity as being in flux, or as, the opportunity to build on it, then it can be really exciting to add to it instead of feeling destabilized by it and feeling destroyed by it. You're now I'm yes, I'm this, and, right? I'm my father's daughter, and I'm someone's donor conceived child. I am an only child, and I am my sister's sister, and that's been really cool for me. It's just, so I think I've said so many times that's been really cool, but that's the only way I feel about it, right? I'm it's been so cool. And if you are willing to let that happen and to be open to it, I think it can be a lot more joyful than destabilizing. And that feels like a better way to live for me. So.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I'm so grateful for you telling me this story. And I know how many people it's going to touch. I have my friends in my own circle who have found out that they were donor conceived. And I think that we will hear many more stories about this. So the fact that you've come forward and you have such a positive message, I think is going to be helpful to so many people.
Thank you so much. This is the first time that I've told this story on any kind of larger platform. I've sort of told people in my life here and there. And I'm really excited. I hope that it helps somebody. I know that there are a lot of feelings around these revelations. And I hope that, everyone's entitled to their feelings and however they react and respond. But I hope that even just hearing this more hopeful perspective from somebody, I hope that it helps anyone. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to tell it. And there are so many more of us out there, and I want to hear their stories too.
So if people want to reach out to you, where can they follow you and tell us all the things that we need to know?
Sure. I think Instagram is probably best. I'm pretty active there. So it's just my handle is my name, at Kate Kaput. And it is exactly the way that it looks, like the word KATE, KAPUT. And I don't know, beyond that, I'm a writer. So I do have a portfolio site, and I haven't written about this piece of my story yet, but I hope to soon. And if people wanted to connect even more personally, they could feel free to email me as well, katekaput@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
The amazing Kate Casey.
I want to thank my fantastic guest, Kate, and remind you to click subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review. I hope that you join the Facebook group, Reality Life with Kate Casey. If you have a really interesting donor story, if you have an interesting adoption story, please reach out to me. I would love to hear it. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to my What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com. You're going to get a list of what to watch in unscripted television every week. You can get bonus podcast episodes by going to Patreon, and they're also available on Apple Podcasts. For Patreon, it's patreon.com/Kate Casey. And also make sure that you follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KCCA, TikTok, it's Kate Casey, Twitter and Threads at @KCasey. And I got to tell you, you got to check back Monday for the What to Watch episode, check back for Tuesday's episode, which is a really fascinating case. And I've got 2 book club books that you're not going to want to miss. So make sure you check out for those as well. Go to katecasey.substack.com for more info.
You set the gold standard for your business. Your website should do the same. Wix puts you at the helm, so you can enjoy the creative freedom of designing your site just the way you want. Want someone to bounce your ideas off? Talk with AI to create a beautiful site together. Whatever your business, manage it from one place and tie it all together with a personalized domain name. Gear up for success with a brand that says you best. You can do it yourself on Wix.